Yeah, some brands can be a little bit harsh, but properly distilled, aged in oak, whether bourbon, Tennessee sour mash, made from corn, barley, winter wheat, or my favorite rye, there's nothing so sweet. But not so sweet has been the spirit's long-standing hostile relationship with government entities that manifests itself quite often in excessive regulation and taxes. This is ironic considering that one of the early sparks of the Revolutionary War was some New Englanders protesting heavy taxes on rum. Yet one of the first acts of then President George Washington was to enact an excise tax on the production of whiskey, which some farmers in southwestern Pennsylvania didn't like, resulting in the Whiskey Rebellion. Ironically, that tax was intended to pay off the debts of the Revolutionary War. Yet the precedent was set, government intervention into the spirits industry, and it continued and culminated to the, I guess you could say, the most severe punishment in Prohibition. Now, many of you may say, well, wait a second, beer and wine were also affected by Prohibition. Yeah, that's true. But the original intent of prohibitionists was to ban the production of spirits. And actually, the consumption of beer and wine were actually encouraged as an alternative to the evils of whiskey. It wasn't until more extreme elements of, you can say, temperance, or hijacked the temperance movement, that virtually all alcoholic beverages were banned. Now, post-prohibition, you could see that the beer and wine industry slowly recovered. And today we're experiencing a renaissance in those industries. It seems like there's a new winery or brewery popping up daily or weekly. Not so with spirits. Government regulations and taxes still limit the choices that we have, and it's very difficult to open up a new distillery. Yeah, there's some that are popping up here and there across this country. Many of those, however, are either virtual distilleries where the physical production is done at an existing plant, or they're wineries or breweries that are expanding their product lines into spirits. The standalone startup distillery is still rather quite rare. Which leads us to today, standing in front of Catoctin Creek Distilling Company. This is the work of Becky and Scott Harris, who you could say they've navigated the bureaucratic minefield to create and open the first legal distillery in Loudoun County since Prohibition. How'd they do it? I don't know. Let's go in and find out on MyJoogTV.
How high is this mountain that I've fallen down? How far have I tumbled to?
So we've moved back inside here into the operations of Catoctin Creek Distilling Company, and we're here with Scott Harris, who's the proprietor and co-owner, I guess you'd say.
Yeah.
And our musical guest today is Andrew McKnight. Now, Scott, I'm going to put you on the spot right away. Is when I first came to you, approached you about this topic, immediately you said, can we get Andrew? So what is it about Andrew's music that really speaks to you?
Well, you know, first of all, I mean, he makes great music. I really enjoy it. We first heard Andrew a little while back playing with his band Beyond Borders, and we really enjoyed the show. I mean, it was a fabulous show. But, you know, what we're doing here, I mean, we're all about local, right? And we're all artists, you know. We make whiskey, Andrew makes music, and, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on in this local area, and it's all about celebrating and enjoying that. And so that's why I picked Andrew.
Yeah, and it sort of ties in. I heard about you, the name recognition I was a little bit familiar, but I didn't know a whole lot about your music. So as I was researching you, I found out that, you know, as we head towards the Blue Ridge Mountains, your fan base sort of increases, and so it sort of ties in with the whole whiskey moonshine, you know, is out that way. So how much do you know about Scott's operation?
Quite a bit, actually. I used to be an engineer, and when I first heard about him, it was actually one of my bandmates, Les Thompson, who had found them on Facebook and liked them, and I said, Catoctin Creek Distilling Company, they got to be somewhere around here. So I've gotten to know them through, and a great deal of respect for what they're doing with the power of social media too, and in that sense that we're both, you know, locally based and locally derived, if you will, organically hatched ideas, but we both understand and recognize and appreciate the power of social media to help us bring our brands everywhere, you know, and even now that one can do concerts live on the internet and have people tune in from all over the world without ever leaving your porch or your recording studio or whatnot like that, I've got a great deal of admiration for what they've done in building the brand around this quality product, but also around the idea and around the this is our home base here. Western Loudoun County is a beautiful place to call home, but it's an inspiring place to be someone who wants to live in some kind of relationship, positive relationship with the land and the surroundings. And it certainly inspires a lot of my music.
Well, good. Well, let's talk about the operation. When in my introduction outside, I mentioned that this is a rarity, standalone distillery. So how did the concept come into your mind, and then how did you actually do this?
Yeah, well, you know, actually, a rarity you say that. It's funny, we always disclaim the fact that we are the first legal distillery in Loudoun County since Prohibition. There are, in fact, probably quite a few guys up in the hills still doing what we're doing, but we wanted to do it legal and build a business out of it and make a quality product that we could put on the shelf and sell. And so my wife and I have always had a great love of things like wineries and distilleries and stuff, and we were a little bit, we almost needed counseling or something, because it seemed like every time we go on a vacation with the family, we'd find a distillery to go to or something, no matter where we went. And so I kept sort of bugging her about this idea, after 20 years in the computer business, gosh, I'd love to start a distillery. And she's like, that's crazy, that's crazy, that's crazy. And finally, I said it one too many times to her, and she says, well, damn it, Scott, go write a business plan. And I was like, oh, business plan, exactly. I think she thought that was the last she'd ever hear from me, and in fact I did, and we went and wrote the business plan, put together, and once, after many revisions and a lot of sweat and tears, we got a version that was like, this could work, we could do this, and so from there we went and got financing, bought equipment, and all of a sudden here we were, and we were doing it. It was like, wow, I can't believe it, we've actually done it.
So how long, because obviously what we had talked about earlier is that wineries and breweries have an advantage because they can home brew and make wine. And so winemakers can learn at home before they actually go public. Distillers, legally, you can't.
Right, it's illegal. It's federal law. You cannot do home distillation, and that's a holdback from Prohibition. And so it is. It's very risky. There's a certain amount of classes you can take, or you could get a job at a distillery, but there frankly aren't that many distillery jobs in the country. There's many in Kentucky, there's California, and a few other places. But it is difficult to get a job in the trade. And so there's some classes you can take. There's some really good, in-depth classes you can take, and we took some. Learned the craft. Becky went to one that had a sensory analysis piece where she tasted over 75 spirits, both good and bad, some that were dreadful. So you can learn and teach your palate, what those flavors taste like. And so there was a lot of training in that regard. A lot of that was done in the first year. But all that said, there's still an awful lot of, you've got to put it all out there on the line, have all the equipment in place, have it all ready to turn on, and never having turned it on before the feds will give you a license. So you've kind of got to be a little bit,
sure,
I hope this works. I hope this works.
If we put it to the musical sphere, it'll sort of be like, Andrew, you saying, okay, I'm going to learn how to play the dobro. I'm going to give the concert a year from now, but I'm not going to be able to practice. I'm not going to be able to rehearse. I'm going to go out there live.
That's right.
And then you're going to go out there live the first time.
Yeah, exactly. First time.
It's a
step on
scary
stage.
thing.
Yeah, and so it's scary. That's what it is. So what about the recipes? I mean, you got to come up with a recipe. How do you do it?
We did. Well, the recipe for making whiskey in a lot of ways is very similar to making beer. The recipes for making brandy is similar to making wine. Brandy is basically fruit-based wines turned into distilled spirit, and whiskey is basically a beer. And I've got experience in both of those. I've made both. I worked in a winery. My first job as a 15-year-old in high school was working in a winery, and I worked there for a few years and loved it. And then I went off and did my career in computers, and it was funny because I came back to the point, what was the best job I ever had? And I was in that winery, and I always loved that winery job. And this is a lot of overlap from that. So there was a lot of experience to be gained there as well. So.
All right, well, let's go ahead and see the process.
Okay, sure. Well, let me talk through the process of the whiskey, I guess. We're doing brandy right now, actually. We just got in some grape wine from Torera, local vineyard here.
Which, if we want to plug our very first episode, was at Cadillac Sky.
Exactly.
So we
yeah.
down with Jordan Harris.
That's right. No relation. But so Torera, basically, we contracted with them. They made a wine for us to our specifications, to our recipes. You don't make wine for brandy the same way you make wine for drinking. It's a little different. And we've actually got some loaded in the still now, ready to go for tomorrow's batch. So we're really excited to be doing brandy right now. But most of the year we're doing rye. We're doing rye whiskey. And so what we do is in the mash tank here, this will be very familiar for the home brewers out there. We basically fill that up with 1,000 liters of water, get it up to near boiling, and we put in 700 pounds of organic rye grain. And we begin to cook it. And through cooking it and through the enzymes that are in the malt, we're breaking down those long carbohydrates into simple sugars that the yeast can ferment. So at the beginning of the day, the rye mash is a very sticky, very pasty, tastes very starchy substance. It can be so thick, in fact, that we've killed our motor there and flipped the breaker. It'll gum it up so much it won't even go, and it's a pretty big motor. But by the end of the day, after all the conversion of the sugars has happened, it's actually very sweet, very smooth, like a smoothie. It tastes like almost like a sweet bowl of oatmeal. It's very nice, and of course that's the perfect sweetness for the yeast. So then we pitch the yeast in, and we'll put it in big fermentation tanks, and then we'll keep it in the chilled, insulated tent back there where we ferment it for 3 to 5 days. And what we're looking to do is make a mash that's about 10% alcohol. And the yeast that we have we call it the Chuck Norris of yeast. It's distiller's yeast. It works fast and very effectively. It'll basically ferment that out, and then we'll gravity feed it right into the still and distill off the alcohol. And so basically the slurry that goes in there is just a bunch of rye grain chunks. It's very much like a smoothie. It'll boil away, and the steam from the rye the alcohol will percolate up through the system, up through the column. It passes through the line arm, which is the fat tube there, down into the condenser, where we'll capture it here in this bucket. And then we'll just capture it in the bucket there, and then we'll keep the distillate for the bottle, for the barrel. Typically when you're distilling, you have what they call 3 parts of the distillation. There's the heads, the hearts, and the tails. And in the early stage of distillation, as the temperature of the system is coming up, you're getting a lot of alcohol below the boiling point of ethanol. So you're getting methanol, you're getting a lot of poisonous alcohols, which are in every natural fermentation, but in small quantities, so they're not poisonous. Well, in distillation, when we concentrate them, they are poisonous, and we have to remove them.
And I think also that's something to bring up in what sort of gives spirits a bad name, is because when you ban a spirit, you sort of get the black market in, and that's probably what they're bottling is more.
Well, that's the thing. The moonshiners out there either don't know or don't care, are either unscrupulous or unknowledgeable about these things, and then are greedy to produce as much alcohol as they can, and then they put out a product that is harmful. And so, we capture the heads. The heads are then either disposed of, or you can use them for things like cleaning. They make excellent 90% alcohol. It's great for cleaning windows, toilets. I mean, it's a super sterilizer. And because we're producing it from our organic product, it's a organic cleaner as well, which works well for us.
So you bring up the organic. Let's get into that. So everything is it just the rye that's organic, or all your?
Yeah, all of our rye-based products are organic. Right now, we're still working with some wineries to establish an organic grape in Loudoun County. That's not happened yet, but we're working on that. But all of the rye products, including the gin, which is based off our rye as well, are all organic. So.
Now, how much does between, say, your distillery and another one, does just a regional mark where you can really say this really reflects our region? Is that,
I definitely, with the grape wines that we're doing from local Loudoun grape vineyards, I mean, that is a really neat local story right there. And then if you think about rye whiskey, a lot of the whiskey that they were drinking in this country before Prohibition, from the time of George Washington at the Mount Vernon distillery to Prohibition itself in the 30s, was a rye whiskey. And a lot of it was even an unaged rye whiskey like our Mosby Spirit. So we purposely created a beverage that sort of harkened back to that history of what was going on in Virginia. They were drinking a lot of rye whiskey, and they were drinking a lot of peach brandy. And so those are both culturally important beverages in this area. So
Andrew, I want to bring you into this whole regional model, because as we said before, your fan base seems to increase as we get out this way. Do you actually sing about the mountains, or is it just that you tour mostly around this area to have such a larger fan base here?
I tour all over the country. I write a lot about this area, and I think I always find the expats, the people from the Virginia Hills or the Shenandoah Valley, wherever I go, because they're the ones who come up to me after a show and say, "You make me homesick." But, there's so many stories soaked into Virginia's red clay. I mean, if you cut through all of the pages of American history, it all has roots here. And I think that the thing that speaks to me personally and as an artist is so much of the fact that you're never far from the echoes of the past, the footsteps of the ghosts, all of it. It's all here. And I personally have been here long enough to see a lot of the land plowed over and paved over and subdivision cities sprout where I'd seen fields when I first came here. And I think one of the things that I appreciate so much about the wineries and some of the various different agribusinesses here is that there's another use for the land that's actually become as valuable as turning it into those houses. And amen for it. I think we lose a lot of our story. Mm-hmm. And my job is really as a storyteller. I live in a pretty amazing time. I feel like, what Woody Guthrie chronicled about the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, or Dylan in the 60s, I feel like I'm kind of witness to as fundamental a change in the way that we live right now. And when we talk about social media, it's how much we've become a community of choice as opposed to a community of geography. And I don't think we're really aware quite yet of how huge the ramifications of that are. But I feel like it's kind of both my job and a privilege that I'm here now and chronicling some of that. And you hear some of that in my music, and some of it's a little bit more about, being a little, mischievous and having some fun and all of that. But, one of the reasons that I'm so appreciative of what Scott and Becky do here is there's a complexity to what they do. It's not just let's make it and call it good. It's all of the thought that goes into it and all of the many layers of it. And as a songwriter and a storyteller, I guess I kind of look for those little details that maybe you don't catch the first time around, and yet that set in your mind the movie that you step into. There's something almost like fine literature about drinking a fine wine, or I really appreciate the artisanship of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, you two have a similar bond in the slow food, local food movement, and obviously this fits in.
Well, what Andrew was touching on about the farmland, and some of the farmers here, when they get old and retire and the families don't want to do it anymore, they sell and build subdivisions. And I mean, that's a crop that has one planting, and then it's over. And it's nice. What we're doing here in a small way, we're trying to contribute to the fact that there are good agricultural uses for this land. And oftentimes, when we're talking to people, like Congress people and stuff about the benefits of a business like this as we're trying to get started, there is an agricultural benefit. We're buying from local farmers, we're buying from the local community, we try to source our products locally and push it back into the community so that we do support those local farmers.
And also I understand you actually recycle some of your waste.
We do, and that's a really neat story as well. We have a farmer who comes and gets all of our rye mash. Once we've removed the alcohol from the rye mash, it's still a very nutritious food stock for cows, and so he comes reliably once a week, gets 400 gallons of rye mash every week, which is quite a lot, and takes it out to his girls, his cows. And he had 8 cows, now he's got 16 because they all had babies, so we have our first batch of organic rye calves. But there's some neat video on our website, to plug the website for a minute, a video of us taking that rye mash out to the farm and watching these cows so thirsty and anxious for it, and they're flinging it on their shoulders, and they're having a good time, knocking my kids out of the way. It's a great video. I love watching it.
Okay, well, what's the URL?
That's catoctincreek.com.
And where would somebody find your music?
AndrewMcKnight.net.
Okay. So let's. So once we've had it in the.
So we got through the heads, we got through the poisonous stuff, we've removed it and saved it and used it for cleaner. Then we get into the hearts. And the hearts, by the name, obviously, is the good stuff. That's the stuff that's going to go in the bottle, into the barrel. Okay? And so we'll pull off the hearts, and it tastes delicious, right? I mean, it's obviously, when it's coming off the still, you can dip your finger and taste it. It tastes like, if it's a brandy, it tastes like grape. If it's a whiskey, it tastes like a rye grain spirit. It's really nice. And so then that'll boil for a long time, and then at the end of the distillate, there are what we call the fusel oils. And the fusel oils are those things that typically give you hangovers when you drink too much. and they smell really bad, and the flavor dominates the end of the spirit, which is what we call the tails. Okay, and so the tails, as the temperature is rising up above ethanol up into water, you're getting a lot of these tails, and they smell like, I think it's like rancid meat, very nasty. And yet, there's still some very good alcohol in there. And so what we'll do is we'll accumulate these tails in a can. Once we have 20, 30 gallons of these tails, we'll redistill them. And by redistilling them, you can push those fusel oils back to the end of that distillation and pull out about 70 to 80% of the neutral alcohol that's in there. And it's a nice neutral alcohol, which we can actually use then as a base for making our gin. And so then we'll take that neutral alcohol, what we call our double distilled tailings, and we'll put in juniper and herbs and soak it. It turns the spirit, which is clear as water, to a kind of a muddy yellow color. We'll put that back into the still, distill it a third time, and what comes through is the steam from the alcohol with the botanical oils of the herbs, and it just is lovely stuff. We take the herbs and compost them. I've got the best compost heap in town, so that's basically it. And then, of course, you know, if we take the hearts then and we bottle them, that's our white whiskey, our unaged Mosby Spirit. We put them in the barrels here. That's the Brownstone Rye, which we have right here. And then, of course, the gin comes through bottled straight off the still.
And for the record, this is actually a bottle I purchased at the ABC store in my town of Vienna. And I purchased it February. It's one of the bottling days, maybe February or March. And it has actually just opened, just took the wrapper off, so it'll be open for the first time.
Let me just check. I want to see this is batch one.
Yeah,
this is the first
nice.
And actually, I came here and actually Becky autographed the label.
What we'll do, since it's batch one, we'll go ahead and drink it, but when you're done, we'll fill it back up and reseal it so it'll look like batch one forevermore.
So let's we'll take a break here and we'll get organized here and we'll do a little tasting. We'll be right back. So we are back here ready to do a tasting, and when you're tasting whiskey, there's actually a few different methods you can choose. You can actually just pour it right into a glass and drink it neat. Many people put just a couple drops of water, which is actually my preference, dampens down the alcohol a little bit, or others actually use like to put it on the rocks with a little bit of ice. So we'll go
And you
ahead.
know what we say? We say we don't mind as long as you're drinking it.
So I'll pour a little bit, and so Andrew, how do you usually?
I'm a 2 rocks guy.
I drink it neat.
Look at that. So we have all three
On
represented
display.
here.
Yep.
We need somebody here with some Dr. Pepper to be the fourth, you know. That's,
And that's another thing to get to is that obviously people can mix this. You know, whether you want to make a whiskey sour.
right. It's actually a nice whiskey for mixing. It really is. It does nice. They've got some great recipes up at Magnolia's. The Sazerac is my favorite, and I would drink it like Kool-Aid. I love it. It's really good. Really good with this.
Yeah. So this is, you know, like I said, this is from the very first batch, what Scott said, and it's been unopened. So this is the first time.
Thank you. And autographed.
Autographed by Becky, the
Yeah.
distiller.
So who actually, and it's your wife does most.
She does most of. She'll let me play with the equipment sometimes, but she does most of the distillation herself, and she's here pretty much every day doing that, and then I help out on the weekends.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks
Now-
for watching.
Now,
Cheers.
obviously, you do get some aromas with this.
Yes,
now, is
you
it
do.
like wine where you're supposed to?
You
pour a
do.
little bit
I taste whiskey like I taste wine. So the first thing I do is stick your nose in there and you describe the aromas you smell, and do that several times. Now, when I smell it, I smell lots of caramel, flan, a lot of butter and sweetness, and all of what you're smelling there. All of that is the oak. So what you're getting is all that wonderful stuff out of the oak. And what's not known from a lot of people is that every spirit that's brown or has color to it like this, it's actually the oak that gives it the color, and most of the flavor, actually 60% of the flavor comes from the wood. So whether it's a brandy, a tequila, a rum, or a whiskey, it's a lot of it, what you're tasting is oak, and so that's what you're getting right
And so do you also, in addition to the barrels, you actually use chips also?
No, we don't use chips. We don't use chips. It's just a new charred oak barrel. So
Nice.
And these are Minnesota white oak. This is from a cooperage up north of Minneapolis.
So you're following the bourbon tradition.
Yeah.
Now, is it every batch will be a brand new oak?
Every batch is a new barrel.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a federal requirement for whiskey. To call it whiskey, you have to do that.
Is it real for all
It
whiskey?
is.
That's something I didn't know.
There's all kinds of funny little wormholes in the federal codes that we have to follow, and that's one of them.
So if you didn't do that, what would you have to call it?
We'd have to call it something like whiskey distilled from a rye mash with used cooperage. Yeah, who's gonna buy it? So yeah, maybe small print on the bottle. So then when you taste it, you get a very distinctive flavor that's not like a bourbon. It's lighter than a bourbon, but it's spicy. It's got a spicy, peppery quality to it, and that's what you're getting from the rye. There's a lot of really neat flavor there from that rye. One of the things that makes our whiskey a little bit unique, besides the fact that it's organic, is the fact that it is made from 100% rye mash. So most rye whiskeys that you buy, in fact, the rye is very difficult grain to work with. It's very sticky, as I mentioned earlier, and cleanup is very difficult. So what they'll do often is blend in corn and wheat to make it more workable, to bring up the alcohol content in the yield, and that makes it cheaper. But we really like that unadulterated 100% rye flavor, so we're willing, sort of labor of love, to work with it, despite the fact that it's a really difficult grain.
And I can say honestly, there is very little burn. I mean, the tail is completely smooth. And what I did is I just like to put a little bit of water in it, just dampens down the alcohol, lets a lot more of the aromas come out, and you get more of just the true of the oak and the flavor of the rye.
And it's delicious.
And that is nice. So this weekend, either tomorrow night or on Sunday, we're going to go see you play. Now, you play as a solo act, but you're also with a larger outfit,
Right.
Beyond Borders. How did that come about?
When we finished up my 5th solo album, Something Worth Standing For, back at the beginning of 2008, we did a couple of CD release concerts at the Kennedy Center and at the Franklin Park Arts Center here. It was actually the first show they did in our own local performing arts center. They weren't quite ready to go, but they wanted to do it, and it was a lot of fun. But it was the first album that I had done where I had not gone in with a clear vision of how the final product was going to come out. You know, I've been at this long enough that I kind of have a vision for each album when I go in the studio, and it may not come out exactly the way I'd envisioned when I start the process, but this time we were new parents. My bass player friend from Colorado, who I tour with some out west, Sean Kelly, had just been diagnosed with cancer and had gone through quite an ordeal, and we postponed the recording sessions hoping that he'd be able to come out and join us. So there's a lot of turmoil going on personally going into the recording sessions. And my now bandmate, Les Thompson, who is also the owner of Cabin Studios where I record, and one of the founding members of the Nitty Gritty Dirt Band, Les said, you know what, trust the process. We're going to get, a couple of other musicians in here that we both really trust, and we'll make this thing come to life. And for the first time, I really took that to heart. I really let somebody else say, it's going to be okay, don't worry about it. You don't have to know what the ending is going to come out like. And it was really cathartic. It was a really pretty amazing process. And over the course of the couple weeks we were in the studio, I finally started getting lyrics and musical arrangements coming together that had eluded me up until that point. So when the album was done, it had basically been largely a band album, and not all of the band was available to go and do the CD release concerts. So Les stepped in and played the bass, and my current bandmates Lisa Taylor and Stephanie Thompson were the doo-wop girls out on the side, and we did the shows, and afterwards they'd said, this was a lot of fun, maybe we should do some more. And that's when Lisa's a wonderful drummer, a fabulous drummer, and Stephanie, Les's wife, is a great singer and songwriter, and we've handed her 6 or 7 different instruments over the last couple of years. She's like the utility infielder that makes the whole thing go. Les and Lisa and I make the bricks of the foundation, and then all of the stuff that makes the foundation really have that different sheen for each song is usually what's in Stephanie's hands. So we've become very close personally, and I think that we reflect that on stage. And for me, it's the first time that I've been in a band in about 15 years, and it feels really good.
And that's when researching you and listening to you, some of your solo and some of the Beyond Borders. I being more of a rock and roll guy myself, I really like having you got the drum kit there. I mean, your guitar work, I love listening to the picking and the strumming. I mean, it's a really great sound.
Thank you.
And so we're really looking to hear you play live. And you guys had also talked about social networking, and obviously, for me, I actually heard about you from a post from Lori Corcoran on Facebook saying, hey, they're doing a bottling. And I'm like, a distilling company? Do you guys actually, it's great to say, okay, we're on Facebook, come see us, but do you have any metrics that would say, this is really bringing in new customers?
What we found, and I can't speak maybe for Andrew, but what we found, we had over 1,000 Facebook fans before we ever made a single drop of whiskey. And you might ask, how in the hell did we do that? Why did we do that? And why was that the case? And what we were doing is we were telling a story, and we did it from the beginning. We were telling a story. Hey, here's this family that's lived in Loudoun County for over a dozen years, and we got this crazy idea to build something called a distillery, and nobody's done it before in this county. And so we were, at the beginning, we were talking about, well, now we're submitting our federal license packet. It's 200 pages. And we made a joke that every page on it had a Federal Paperwork Reduction Act notice on it. But as we went through the process, we were open and sharing and telling what we were doing, and I think people found that engaging. They felt like they saw this business start from nothing, and watched it grow. And so the benefit for us of that was, by the time we had product on the shelf,
there was demand.
There was demand. People knew about it. There was buzz, no pun intended. And people went and swamped the store, and it sold out in the first day.
And that's how for me, it's more as like, boy, I wish I was doing that. I wish I had the idea, or just take that risk. I wish I was the type of person that could do that. And I think a lot of people are just living through
vicariously. Yeah. I suppose so. And I can tell you the benefit of not being us is that you can sleep at night.
Right.
You don't have the terror in your mind. What the heck are we doing?
Right.
So, it is, but it is a good story, and I think the story plays well. And so with Facebook, in particular, more so than Twitter even, we find that you've got to keep it relevant, interesting, and current. And so we can't just say, oh, we're making rye again today for the 30th day in a row.
Right,
exactly. People get bored, people get tired.
Social media helped write the story. Essentially, so many of the people who have become supporters, advocates of what you do, really has come from the fact that a lot of people had a hand in that story coming to life. From my own standpoint, I walked out of my day job as an environmental engineer at the end of 1996. And I was already pretty determined that my career was going to be different, in that I didn't want to try to follow a path that took me away from the people who are the consumers, the supporters, to have that direct interaction. And at that point, people thought that I was, sort of a high-tech genius because I could use email, and the internet reasonably, in an advanced way to communicate that and to keep people coming and to tell the stories that I was collecting along the way. And I think for me, social media just was something that it's like, oh, man, I'm so glad that there's a way to do this a little more conveniently, and to allow the people who want to participate in your activities on a more frequent basis than the once a month email that goes out to the couple thousand people on my email list. The Facebook and Twitter and all of that is really a way for them to stay as connected as they want to. Yeah. And that's really what it comes down to, is what matters to you, the person. If I write a song that moves you in some way, I'm honored by that. But I'm not going to assume that 5 albums worth of songs are going to all move you the same way. But the fact that we connected for that period of time, that moment in your life where I provided the soundtrack for a little while, that's really what social media makes possible, is for people to say, this mattered to me now, and all of their friends see it too. It's an odd kind of way to look at the world, and it certainly is so out of sorts with what the traditional music business has been. But I think Scott can certainly testify to the fact that you make a lot of really good connections with people, some of whom you get to meet in person, others whom just help you feel like, okay, that's pretty cool. It's just a little extra motivation going into your daily grind of stuff that, there's people out there who care about what we're doing and
you're
how
not
we're
just
doing it.
putting it out and people aren't coming, that actually people are paying
Right.
attention and listening. So let's, I want to finish up here talking about the rye because this is available in the ABC stores in Virginia.
It is, and for your larger internet audience, we also sell this now in Washington D.C., in District of Columbia, in Maryland, Baltimore, Frederick, surrounding areas, all through Maryland. And in fact, we just opened up a new market in Northern California around Sacramento and Lake Tahoe. And it's interesting, that area up there is a lot like Loudoun County. It's a more affluent community, people who can afford a higher end sort of organic craft spirit. And they appreciate, a finer beverage like that. So it was a good market for us, and we were thrilled to get it.
But people should come here
Yes.
and get it because there's so much here to see and do and so much to visit.
Except for it's not available at the local ABC store. They're sold out.
It is from time to time. We're working with them to get their ordering better. So
Price of success.
yes, that's unfortunately it does sell out.
Which is something that we want to be honest about and talk about, is that when you go into a store to actually purchase this, looking at it, this is approximately $40, which when you look at it, there could be some sticker shock. But there's many factors you have to look at it. First of all, there's all the organic ingredients that we just talked about that go into it. It's a handcrafted at a micro distillery, so they obviously
Made it.
Yeah.
So they obviously don't have the economies of scale where they have these huge tanks and fermenting and they can just throw everything in and cut the price down. The other thing is that factor we just learned is the state takes 50% off the top. So we have a $40 bottle, the state immediately takes $20. We have $20 that goes back to Scott, who then has to pay federal taxes, has to pay
Ingredients,
ingredients
supplies,
and everything
costs.
else.
Yeah, it's a tough business to be in, and in Virginia controls the entire distribution through the retail side of it. So they take all those profits that would otherwise have gone to distributors and retail stores and all of that. So in the end, like you said, they get 50% of every bottle we sell. So it is a tough business. The margins are not there. So we're not doing it to get rich. We're doing it because we love doing this, and it's a lot of fun.
And the other way I like to look at it is that you can go to Troyer Winery, spend $40 on a bottle of wine that you're going to finish in 2 hours. You come here, buy a $40 bottle of rye whiskey, and that's going to last you 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Right,
I mean, that's
right.
that's going to be with you for a while.
Yeah, that is an important point. You don't drink it quite as fast as you would a wine.
Right.
We hope not.
You don't want to finish that in 2 hours.
But unless you've got a great group of friends around, yeah. So, but it does last a bit longer.
So the brandy that you're working with now, how long till that's good?
So brandy is interesting. Again, more federal laws. The federal law on brandy, grape brandy, and it only applies to grape brandy, is that it has to be aged for a minimum of 2 years. And if you don't age it for a minimum of 2 years, you have to call it immature brandy. And of course, nobody would buy such a thing as that. So the brandy, we will distill it. We've just begun. This season has just started. That'll be put away shortly. By the end of, say, November, we'll be done with all of our brandy production. We'll put that away and say goodnight to it for 2 years, and then come back and see it in a couple of years, see how it turned out. So it's a little bit of patience. I'm learning patience in this business, which is something
and that's what we got into in the introduction, to how basically government regulations reflect how they produce things. So what we will do is we'll come back here in 2 years. We'll see how the brandy came out. We'll see how Andrew's new CD worked in that time and what he's doing.
And maybe we'll share a glass of brandy over the whole discussion.
Absolutely.
Sounds
So cheers and thank
Cheers.
you very much.
Salud.
And stay tuned for a performance from Andrew McKnight, and we'll see you next time on MyJoogTV.
Thanks for watching.
Dear Colonel Mosby, please sir, a moment moment of your time. I know it's strange. I write from 1999. I sent this letter in the hope that it will find you on the darkest day of your life. The dogwood's blue. The date is April 29. The year it ended, 1865. With so much blood spilled on this land, you would find looks little like what you left behind. We honor this place as hallowed ground, where they take its defense, 'cause we're honor bound. Here in the future, invading armies cross our land with big machines, so much larger than a man. Strip the red clay